So I'm glad you introduced me to Jaws, and I had gotten the backstory from you that if I was able to enter the game after understanding the rules versus learning the rules as I played the game, huge difference, I think, in the enjoyment of the game from there. But Mike and I are going to do our Panda review of the Super Nintendo Jaws game. Um, any introductory comments before we just start working our way through this one?
Regular Nintendo, not Super Nintendo.
What did I say? Super Nintendo?
Yes.
Okay, I could edit that, but regular Nintendo, my bad. Um,
Regular. It looks like this because I love props.
yeah.
It looks exactly like this because this is my copy of
The Nintendo Entertainment System version of Jaws. Okay, sorry about that. Um, so I'll go ahead and start. And as a reminder, we use the scientifically proven panda method, 1 to 5 pandas. Categories are fun factor, controls, difficulty, replayability, and visual appeal. So we'll kind of work our
This
way
is a
through.
ranking system agreed upon not just by us. I mean, top level scientists and the Pope came together and all agreed on this.
That's right. And the Hague, all the folks, and Judge Judy, and I think that's about it. So fun factor. I'm gonna come in at. I was struggling with this one. Um, I'm gonna give it a 3 for fun factor. I mean, it's a decent game. It's not a bad game. I didn't dislike playing it, but it's not a particularly diverse environment you're in. You're kind of going between these two ports on a regular basis, and uh, kind of the enemies stay the same. They increase. There are some bonus level stuff, which is kind of interesting, and a submarine gets involved. But overall, I'm ending up with a 3 for the fun factor on Jaws. And as I've just stumbled over this intro anyway, do we think we need to provide any other background on the game, or just keep plowing through?
um, I would say the things that are probably most worth noting about this game is this is one of those games that was hated at the time that it came out. There's a whole generation that's grown up hating this game, and it's largely because of two things. It was published by LJN. LJN has a really bad reputation, mostly because LJN didn't make video games. They were a toy company, saw that there was money in video games, and they had rights to all these different IPs. So they started paying people to make games for them that they would then publish. But a lot of times these are smaller companies. They were, giving them ridiculous tight deadlines. And the quality is, let's just say, all over the place when you got an LJN title. That being said, though, for a long time there was this belief that all LJN games are bad. I disagree with that. And I think a lot of people have come to sort of a reappraisal of it as they've understood what happened in the kind of LJN game factory system. And this game is a good example of that. This was one that they had hired Atlas to do, a very well respected game company. But Atlas is busy with a couple other games. So they subcontracted it out to Westone, who had a couple of weeks to make this game and had never made an NES game before. So the Westone guys who are not even credited on the game apparently are very unhappy with it, mostly because they didn't get a chance to really develop it and finish it the way that they would like to have. Also, even though this is called Jaws, it's actually a game of Jaws 4. But Jaws 4 was a failure. So that got dropped from the title. But this is actually a game adaptation of Jaws 4.
Yeah, the uh, because the ending. If you're expecting the Jaws ending scene for taking the shark out, which would have been a cool gameplay kind of thing to do, um, you're gonna get the Jaws 4 ending instead. So it's a thing from there. So fun factor, where are you at on that?
This is actually the toughest one for me. Um, because like a lot of people, I actually hated this game when I initially played it because I rented it. And the problem with rentals back then, at least where I was, and apparently a lot of other people, because there's a lot of reappraisals of this game you'll find on YouTube, which is there was no instructions. So I had no idea what to do. And I don't think this game is super intuitive when you first put it on. I don't think it's easy to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. And like a lot of other people, apparently, I didn't figure out what you were supposed to be doing. I just played it for long periods of time until I finally died or rage quit. When this is a game you can actually beat in probably about 15 minutes to a half hour, depending on whether or not you want to get the sub and some of the other level ups or going for a high score or something like that. But technically, once you've leveled your character up to about level 3 or higher, you can kill Jaws at that point. When you're level 1, it's impossible because you would take over 1,000 hits with your spears, and the fights just aren't that long. The random battles. So for a long time, I hated this game. Later in life, rediscovering it, I have a lot of fun with it now because I actually know how to play the game. And I do give it a lot of credit because even though it is very short, and obviously Westone didn't have time to properly develop all their ideas for this, it does a couple of pretty cool things because it's tough like a lot of early NES games can be, but I think it's approachable. It's not like Friday the 13th, for example, which you need a lengthy strategy guide to kind of get into the first couple times. I think you can just kind of pick up and play this once you know what to do, which is kind of Nintendo's thing. So it has that kind of ease of initially getting into it anyway. And it introduces some RPG elements like random battles that pop up on an overworld playfield and leveling up your character and weapons. But it doesn't get so far in RPG stuff where it's like you're playing a Final Fantasy game and you have to put 100 hours into this. This is again a on average 20-minute game. So there's a lot of stuff I like here, but it is very apparent that just like Westone said, they had a couple weeks to do this and had never made an NES game before. So I'm gonna have to go with Kelly on that, but this was a tough one. So I'm gonna go three pandas as well. But I do think it's a good game. There's a good game in there. It's really a shame they didn't get to finish it because it was probably a great game had they had a couple of months to actually work on this.
Yeah, it puts it in a whole new light when you realize for the short development time, the quality of the gameplay. I mean, it's enjoyable to play. It's well done. Um, we'll get into the visual appeal a little bit later, but I mean, it overall a pretty strong offering, particularly when you know that they kind of had to do it in a rush. Which we'll go to controls. I'm going to give it five pandas because controls are critical to this game. You've got a lot of underwater maneuvering you're going to be doing up and down, left and right, avoiding jellyfish, shooting stuff, and doing all that. And easy, no massive number of key combinations to do it. You got kind of left, right, and fire, up, down, fire. All that stuff's good. There's and then during some of the bonus scenes with the plane dropping, I guess those are depth charges. They kind of look like the old
Yeah.
Wile E. Coyote bombs, but um, the you can control the speed of the plane. That's all you can do on that, but that's something as you kind of Galaga style try and take out those annoying jellyfish. But I thought there's really no complaints at all with the controls. So I said, well, if I got no complaints and it's critical to the game and it was easy for me to master the controls, I got to give it to five panda.
Yeah, again, I'm with Kelly on this one. Five pandas. I can't tell you how many times I rage quit over those jellyfish when I rented this game as a kid. The jellyfish are just awful, just absolutely awful. I will take the battles that are all sharks, which does happen later in the game. If you play long enough, if you're just trying to level up and not just beat Jaws and end the game, but actually get everything, eventually you will get the random battles that are all sharks. So there you go. If that's your thing, that'll happen eventually. The jellyfish are terrible. They have no real pattern. They just kind of shoot all over the place. But the controls are super tight and responsive. And that's not just, it's not, at least on my Super Console X, and again, totally legal ROM because I own a physical copy of this. But playing it on original hardware versus playing it's just as smooth on both. The controls are very responsive. I've died many, many times over the years in this game, but it's my fault and the jellyfish's fault. It's not because the character didn't respond. It's because my hand-eye coordination wasn't quick enough.
Yep. Yeah, and not mean to pick at a wound, but I did a lot of my playtime on the RG35XX, and it also worked out really well. But more on that on a future show, folks. But we'll we'll talk a little more about that.
But yeah,
Uh,
to what Kelly said though, I mean, there's nothing. You're not doing anything that's too heavy into maneuvering or anything like that, but it works. It's simple, intuitive controls, and they work the way they're supposed to.
so good. So difficulties next, and we kind of mention every time we do this, and it was the Pope insisted on it as we came up with our ranking system that that difficulty isn't one's way too easy and five's way too hard. It's just kind of appropriate level of difficulty to make the game enjoyable. Did you make it brutally difficult where it's not really even fun to play, or it's just way too easy? But just kind of tuning it into that. So it's not an easy to hard kind of scale. I struggled with this one a little bit because you can finish the game in fairly short order, which would be kind of a knock. But it is, the gameplay you go through, uh, and I think the jellyfish, as much as uh, Mike doesn't like them, they add good gameplay element to it because they are the thing you've got to avoid more than anything else, and they're pretty devious. So I kind of went back and forth, but I'm gonna go with four pandas for difficulty because it even though it's short, it's pretty it's pretty immersive gameplay. I mean it immersive maybe too strong, but it's good gameplay on there. So but and not too difficult, not too easy. So I go with four.
Yeah, I mean, again, early me is a one on this, a kid me, because I had no idea what I was doing and just played this for hours and got nowhere. Um, so early me hated the difficulty level. Now, yeah, it's too short, and I can see that being a complaint. That does keep it from probably being a five for me, but I kind of appreciate that to a certain degree now because now, like, I have a lot of fun throwing on the original cartridge in the game room. When I'm just taking a break from recording or doing something, I can just take a 15-20 minute break, go put this on, have fun, and the game is done. It's not something I have to devote a ton of time to, but it does feel more difficult and more involved than, say, like a mini game compilation that you would get on something like Wii, for example. It feels a step above that, but not something where you're devoting a lot of time to it. So for me, where I'm at now, it's perfect. For younger me, it was terrible. So I'm going to go with four with Kelly on this one.
Okay. Um, replayability. Um, I'm gonna hit this a little hard on that and go two two pandas for me on this because it is. I mean, to Mike's point, there is um a replayability if you're like, hey, it's this time through instead of just killing Jaws, I'm interested in leveling up as far as I can, getting all the goodies, doing more with the sub and all that. So there's like you can add other kind of challenges to it and all that, but basically, um, it's a pretty repetitive game in terms of what you're doing. Minor differences between if you're in deep water or the shallows, and you can kind of decide what your strategy is on that. But um, it is one that after you've done it once or twice, it doesn't strike me that this is like going to come back beyond kind of like I think the nostalgia thing Mike's talking about that he kind of came back to it after a while and a little bit, but this isn't going to be in heavy rotation. I don't think. I think this is once in every great while you might come back and play it again. So I think it doesn't have the kind of the depth of stuff beyond saying I want to raise my level higher before I go kill Jaws. That's about it to extend the game. So once you kind of master it and do that, outside of always the jellyfish are pretty random. So there's some different play there, but overall, I think this is one place where it fell down a little bit. So I'm going to give it two pandas for replayability.
I mostly agree with Kelly on this one as well. I'm not going to go two. I'm also not going to go five on this one. It is a short, kind of simplistic game. And once you get a rhythm of it, it can be too easy. If you're new to it, those jellyfish are really going to frustrate you. Or if you're trying to level up as far as you can and get the sub and everything, I get that too. If you're trying to stick to the shallow water, which is tougher, things along those lines. I get where you can have fun with it. There is some replayability too, though, in that there are cheats to this that'll allow you to, just fight Jaws or have more battles and do all these kind of things. So I mean, there's a little bit there to mine, but ultimately, to the guys who made it at Westone's point, they didn't get much time with this. They had a couple of weeks to just get together what they could, and were not able to implement a lot of their ideas or things that they could have done. So this is a big what if on their careers, and because of that, it's a frustration for them, and I get that. You can definitely see it, and I do think that that drags it down ultimately. I it's weird nostalgia wise for me because I actually didn't like it when I was a kid, and it's something that playing it later, emulating it, I got into it. So I wouldn't necessarily it's nostalgia, but I do have fun with it. But it's not something I could play like every day. Like it's something I'll get into playing a little bit, put it down for a while, and then I come back to it a few months later, play another few rounds of it. Because if you are playing it back to back, you're just going to get into a rhythm where it's too easy for you, and you're not going to have fun with it. So it's the kind of game it's fun to pick up every once in a while and play. So I would go a little bit higher than Kelly, and I think I'm going to go with a three.
And then finally visual appeal, and we kind of honor the for the platform you're on. So there's only so far you can go. And as I clearly stated at the beginning, this is a NES game, so we have those
And not a late
limitations.
NES game.
Yeah. Um, I I think they did a pretty solid job. I think I mean the stingrays and the sharks and the jellyfish all are reasonable sprites. They're pretty cool on there. Jaws is a little bit of a letdown, maybe. But again, given the constraints and all that, I'm actually going to go four. I think visually it's a good looking game. And so that's where I'm sit on visual appeal.
Yeah, this is one that, again, I kind of go back and forth a little bit on. I don't think the battle stages look that great. Everything's recognized. The sprites are fine, like Kelly said, or what they are, but there is just big fields of, blue for the water and things like that. But again, you are underwater, and there's only so many sprites that Nintendo could have. And you do actually, so one thing this game does really well is that early Nintendo games suffered from tons of flicker on the sprites, and that's because it could only have so many sprites on screen at one time. So when it would go over that, it would cause like a little bit of flicker in some of the sprites and things like that. That was pretty common because it was that or sacrifice the gameplay. So you got a little bit of flicker in games sometimes. You don't really see that in this game, but you do, if you're paying attention, you will notice issues. So the jellyfish and the stingrays and all look like they're supposed to, but they're not particularly detailed. They're good enough to recognize what they are. When you're shooting your harpoons, of which luckily you have an unlimited supply, there can only be 3 harpoon sprites on screen at a time. So I don't know if that's something that you picked up on. You can only shoot 3 back to back. Then it's like you have to wait a second and then shoot 3 more. There's a workaround for this though, if you want to cheat, especially if you're fighting Jaws. Go behind him and just start shooting behind him because as they hit him, the next harpoon sprite will come out, so it'll allow you to just kind of rapidly shoot without worrying about the 3 sprites at one time issue. So there's workarounds for that, so that's cool. I think that this game has really great use of color for Nintendo. I mean, Nintendo is always known for kind of their bright color palettes. Obviously, the NES had a much smaller color palette than the things we're used to after that. But everything is really bright looking, which is kind of neat. It's one of the things that sets this apart from other, kind of horror adjacent games. And I think it's the thing that set Jaws, the movie series, apart. Is that, most horror movies, everything is kind of dark. And other than the opening scene of the original Jaws, most of the franchise takes place in big open spaces in the daylight. So it's one of the things that kind of sets it apart. It is true to that. It's also pretty recognizable to the movie. We've talked a little bit about movie adaptations before and how they're, not usually that great of a representation of the movie. But it's clearly a tropical location. You're taking your boat back and forth to different ports. That's in the movie. Michael Caine flying the plane around and all that's in the movie. And even skewering Jaws at the end of it is directly from the movie. In fact, all the major stuff from the movies in the game, despite how short it is, other than the insanely stupid plotline of psychic sharks, I'm not kidding. It's about psychic sharks that are hunting specific people. That's really what the movie's about. Can't stress that enough. That's the only thing that's missing from this. And I'm okay with that. I don't think anybody was like, man, I wish he was psychic. I wish they found a way to show that. So I mean, it's a good representation, and yeah, some of the sprites are kind of simplistic, but it doesn't have all the flicker that a lot of games at that time did. So I feel like that was a wise trade off on Westone's part. And I think the final fight with Jaws looks pretty impressive. It's a little tough, but graphics wise, it looks pretty impressive. It's kind of almost first person shooter esque. And then when you do beat Jaws, you get a really nicely animated, very short cutscene of flying away from the Bahamas during the sunset. Again, really good use of color. So, it, you know, there's some trade offs there, but I think the color's great. So I'm going to go with Kelly on this one too.
Good.
Psychic sharks. That is for real with the movies. There are certain movies, this one and Hannibal Rising are movies that I have to say out loud to people what they're about. And Hannibal Rising, just in case you guys never saw it, is about Hannibal Lecter as a younger man who is a samurai who hunts Nazis. That's for real what the movie's about. That's really what the movie's about, and really what he wears a samurai mask, carries a samurai sword, and hunts Nazis. That's the for real movie that adults got together and spent tons of money on.
The late great Hannibal Lecter. so so wrapping it all up, that puts me at 17 pandas for Jaws on the NES and Mike for 18 pandas on there. So not breaking to the top of either of our lists, but still a decent game. If you had a chance to play it, you ought to. And since we tipped you off a little bit on some key things to do in there, you won't be spending hours. So it'll be fun. Cool. Any parting comments, sir?
No, I have a lot of fun doing these panda reviews. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Cool. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bog Panda.